Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to another episode of Coffee is for Closers. Me and James as usual again today.
How we going?
Good, man. We're going to talk about B2B versus B2C selling today.
Yeah, and some of the different strategies we use on either of those calls, like how we set it up in terms of structure. Just basically a general conversation, right?
Yeah, so B2B versus B2B transition is always a good one for salespeople to make. So there's a lot more money in B2B. It's a bit of a different, and I'll talk to you about the differences between I guess some of the more technical differences between the two, and also the hybrid model that we find ourselves in a lot these days. So with that being said, cue the intro.
If you listen to this podcast, you will make your first million within 3 years. I'm going to repeat that. You will make $1 million within 3 years of the first episode you listen to. We don't want pikers. We're not here to save the manatees. We're here to make podcasts. You really want this. You listen and review.
Put that coffee down.
I think a lot of confusion is around oh no, I sell B2B because I sell to businesses, but it's well, no, you don't, because you're just selling to solopreneurs and stuff.
Yeah. I wouldn't classify that as a B2B. So maybe explain to start off, how do you classify one B2B versus B2C? And whilst it could be selling to a business, it's not typically a business unless they're purchasing multiples of that product. I'd say that's a major defining factor. Right?
Yeah, it's more enterprise versus solo operators, you know? So most enterprise level sales have, I think it's 6.8 or something like that. It's around between 5 and 7 decision makers.
Yeah.
And so that when you're at the enterprise level, you have to there's different processes that you need to go through in order to actually end up getting the sale. Whereas when you're talking about, a small business, like a solopreneur or somebody with a really, really flat
owner-operator model.
Yeah, or just also a really, really flat org chart where it's maybe one guy at the top and then just a couple dudes under. There's not much of a, pyramid going down. Then that's going to be more of a business to solopreneur or individual, which is different again from B2C, which is business to direct consumer. If you're selling business coaching to coaches, you're doing B2B. If you're selling business coaching to fitness coaches, that's still B2B, but it's it's not enterprise B2B. And those fitness coaches are selling direct to consumer.
Yeah, but you would take that B2C approach to that single.
Yeah. So it's slightly different. So really the big changes are, one of the big myths is that you don't sell an emotion. You still do. You still have a lot of emotive sellings. You're still going through cost of inaction and consequence. The sales cycle is longer. So usually you're going to have a minimum of 3 calls instead of a 1 to 2 call process. And you're going to have some sort of demonstration of your deliverables instead of in a B2C scenario where you can just sell it off whatever you say. But then also contracts play a larger role and stuff like that, of which they don't really play as big of a role in B2C. I've sold thousands and thousands of things to, in that business to individual or business to consumer model where, contracts are borderline irrelevant, really.
Yeah, and it also seems like the biggest holdup in a B2C, classic B2C deal is funding. Whereas the biggest holdup in getting a deal done in the B2B is board approval. Right?
Is what, sorry?
Board approval.
Yeah, that's definitely one of them. Board approval. Not every company has a board, obviously.
Yeah.
We don't have a board. But it's sort of working your way up that chain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So it's you might be talking to a manager. So, what you think relatively straightforward is you have to be able to get to decision makers.
Yes.
And you have to have a process where you can do 1, maybe 2 calls with the manager, but then your third or your fourth call, that's going to want to have the people who can actually pull the trigger. And even then, what really freaks people out when they transition is then contracts are sent out. Once contracts are sent out, then it's
waiting game.
Yeah, waiting game. So the really hard part is getting through those decision makers and being able to navigate the corporate process. And a lot of the time it ends up being an advocacy building game. So if you're doing larger enterprise B2B, really what you're trying to do is you're trying to get the person that you're initially in contact with, sell them into the product or service, right? And like the benefit that it directly has to them, which is the difficult part, because they might not get any monetary benefit, but it might be a status benefit by allowing them to, like, they're the person who introduces someone who saves the company, $400 million. Yep. Like that's a career trajectory thing for them. So like you take them through the consequence of not being that person, like not bringing this to the company. What happens if they find out that you had this information, you didn't bring it to your company? So like, it becomes a consequence of inaction there. And then from there, you just nurture that person as an advocate. One of my coaching clients, his name is Alex. I helped him close like a $25 million deal through just creating a series of corporate advocates in a large organization in Australia. Yeah. And that's all he did. And then he managed to snake his way in there and then got to the decision makers and got the deal.
Yeah, because everyone, like in an enterprise, everyone wants that status when they're, out for Friday night drinks at the end of the week, and it's like, you see Steve, look at the deal Steve got. Can't believe he brought this to the company that made us millions and millions, you know what I mean? Like everybody wants that level of respect amongst their colleagues. So you can sort of, well, not everyone does, but a lot of people do. And if that's what they want, you utilize that to build up to get to the next stage. And then Steve goes and has a chat with his boss, who maybe is a decision maker. Then you get on a call with that person as Steve has sold to him and move forward from that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot more layers to B2B selling, and you have to get through a lot more rigmarole, but the deals are a lot bigger and the commissions are usually a lot larger. But like a really good way to practice it is doing those small B2B deals where like, you might have like a little organizational structure where you can practice these things, and then you can start sort of, I guess, like manipulating your sales process to be more B2B friendly, to where you can transition into bigger and bigger deals. Yeah. But also the framing of how you're introduced to the person is so much more important. Like when you're doing like B2C deals or whatever, like you can just have a title. It's like, VP of sales, and then it's like, you get handed over or something like that. But like how you're handed over and why that person should hop on the first call to begin with. Like it can be a chasing game of emails to even get them on. And one of the things that we've found that's worked really well is once we have an initial time set in, when we get on that one, instead of doing what we would do in B2C, which is try and book the call in the next 48 to 72 hours, we just go same time next week. And then they go, yep. And so we can all agree on same time next week. We get it booked into the diaries. That means we don't all have to go back and forth trying to find something. So it allows us to get things in the diary, because when you're talking to enterprise level people, like there's obviously everyone's busy, like everyone. And so you just want to get them nailed down, get them on a call. And that means that your sales cycle will be at least 3 weeks. Yeah,
cool. Now, just to rewind back, you said like, there's B2C, then there's non-enterprise B2B, then there becomes enterprise B2B. At which point in like that solopreneur where they have that organizational chart, at which point do you move away from the B2C process into a B2B? Like where is like okay, this is sort of getting towards where it needs a longer drawn out process with the demo calls. Like, where's
I think the moment you're not talking directly to a decision maker.
Gotcha.
Like the moment you have a marketing manager or someone in a managerial position and you're not able to actually talk to the guy who can pull the trigger.
Gotcha.
That's when I would go into that process, because you're not really extending the process massively. So even if it's overkill, I'd rather have it be overkill than underkill.
Cool. And all right, so like if we look at like the process and structural change, right? We're at that B2C level, non-enterprise B2B, enterprise B2B. What are some of the actual structural changes that you do when we're switching?
The structural changes. So the first thing is you elongate the process. Right? Because that gives you time to get the decision makers in. So you go to at least a 3-call close. Sometimes you'll pitch on the second call, but most of the time you'll end up doing like your actual, okay, let's send out contracts on the third call. You have to have some sort of visual presentation to provide. It doesn't mean they have to be able to take it home, but it's like you want to be able to run them through like, okay, this is what we're doing. This is your problems. A competitor analysis is always a really strong thing to have. It's not necessarily the case, but like, for example, for 7th level, when we're doing like B2B sales training, like for factory owners or for whatever business we're doing it for, builders or whatever, then it's like we'll take them through. We identify the pain point. we try and steer them into specific pain points, whether it be just like a lack of sales, or what we generally do is we do like the leadership have really let their team down by not providing them with very strong sales training frameworks to allow their team to ultimately be successful. So that allows us to bring it back to a leadership framework, which is it's then very easy for us to get the guys to identify the problem as their own and not the problem of the sales staff. And then it's like we can get the leadership on board, and then that way like they'll do a good job of implementing the stuff they want them to implement, but it also allows them to own the problem. And they go, it's like, well, what do leaders do? Leaders take action, they solve problems. All right, cool. So like, do you want to act as a leader or not, right? So, and it allows us to tie in a lot of cost of inaction there. And yeah, so we take them through that real demonstration. We have a couple of visual ways that we can do that we've mapped out specific for the offer of how their salespeople are feeling, what they're going through, because they don't have set structures in place. Then from there, it's like, this is your problem, this is what it's costing you, and this is how much it costs to fix.
Yeah, okay. Not from like what you present to everyone on a 7th level account, right? If you're doing B2B for Serhnant, as opposed to 7th level, like how do you...
It's the problem you solve.
Yeah.
So like, like we have a particular way of doing things. Like for Serhnant, for example, we sell team training. For brokerages, we sell speaking events. So obviously we have to have different pitch decks for speaking events and for like team training. Or for in-person events, we have to have a pitch deck for that. And it's like basically the problem it's solving. So a lot of the time for like an in-person speaking gig, the problem it's solving could be internal team motivation and like retention, right? So it's like, what are you investing into your guys so that they actually stick around and not go to one of the more competitive and potentially cheaper brokerages that are taking 30% instead of 50%? Like, what are you doing to maintain that? The second thing would be just potentially like pure skill level. Like if we can come in, provide them with some stuff and upskill them and have a level of specificity. So it's like, we just got to really figure out like, what's the problem that we're solving? Right. And then from there, like our pitch deck is going to be relatively generic with deliverables, but then how we deliver that is going to be designed to solve a different problem.
For each individual.
So I'll give you an example. Like I can have a pitch deck, say I'm doing sales training, but we don't provide one-on-one sales coaching. We provide everything in a group or a Roxer, for example, like we do with Inner Circle. Then it's like my pitch deck would be like, we give you this because of this. You know what I mean? And so like you justify the way that you do things, and then you potentially like give reasons as to why you wouldn't do it another way.
Yeah, but you don't do that unless they have an objection of like, I want them to do one. Like I want one-on-one coaching.
Potentially, but sometimes you can just preempt it.
Okay, yeah.
You know what I mean?
All right, so like basically you create a pitch deck and slides of deliverables based around one, knowing the niche, understanding like the objections you've had in the past of what they're looking for.
Yeah.
And then that pitch deck is almost designed to pre-handle the potential objections from the pain points of those people, right?
Yeah, which is the same for any pitch deck, really. Yeah. Your pitch deck just wants to give enough information to where they know what they're getting, but not so much information to where you introduce other objections. Like, because you can do that. You give someone 50 things. Like if I was to go to James and I was to try and sell him into something, and I was like, you get these 42 things.
Yeah.
Right?
It's a lot.
Well, you'd just be like, well, given how busy you are, there's no physical way that you can take advantage of those.
Yeah.
So like more is not better. It's like if I sell you into 3 times a week training for $50 or unlimited training for $55, like you can't do unlimited.
I want 3.
So yeah, you can't do unlimited.
Yeah.
So if I just sell you into $55 for unlimited, like you're never going to come unlimited. Now, no one can ever utilize unlimited, which is why it's a stupid model anyway.
Yeah.
It also really limits your scalability because you have to assume that everybody comes every day, and then all of a sudden you cap your membership. But anyway, that's a whole different.
I also won't come 3 times a week if I've got unlimited because I'm not told where I need to be.
Yeah, but it's just like I'm selling you. It's overwhelming how much you get. So like you'll never feel like you're getting the value. So like if I sell you 3 and you come 3, you're happy. If I sell you unlimited and you come 3, you're dissatisfied. Right? So you're like, man, I'm just not really utilizing it, And so like, then we have to have a drop sell conversation. But like, if you just do unlimited, anyway. So it's just like, I can't present something to someone who's busy that has a perceived
value.
Although you're giving it perceived value, what you're doing is inducing an objection of like, I don't know that I can actually utilize this because now I'm attaching that dollar figure to everything.
So you get to think about it.
I don't need everything, but you're giving me everything. So now I'm like, if you give me a hamper with 25 things in it, I'm only like 3 of them.
I'm not buying the hamper.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if you just charge me the same price for those 3 things, I'd probably be fine with it. Right? Like, that's just the way that human beings work. So you've got to be very careful when you're pitching in the B2B and whatever B2C environment is like, you can't overdo it. You can't be like, you get all this and this. The thud factor of back in the day when you used to order something online and get 17 kilograms or 35 pounds of stuff, like that's not good because if you're busy, like that's a fucking nightmare. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you got to be very careful with how you do things. And I think a lot of people and a lot of like our competitors, and I won't say them, but I know like one of the biggest problems that they have with their sales, and if they just listened to me on this, they would all make more sales, is their pitches are so long and drawn out that like they lose so many sales.
Okay.
And I know because I've gone into those businesses, trained the head guys, cut their pitch down, and they instantly tripled everyone's close rate.
It's crazy. So it brings up another question. It's like you building the presentation with the demo or whatever you decide to call it in that process. Non-enterprise B2B and B2C. Where do you stand on having demonstrations, pitch decks, visual representation of what you do in that sales process?
I think if you're good at it, go for it. Like Vanessa Horn is amazing at it, right? Because she sells for Taki, but she also sells for Simon Bowen. Now, Simon Bowen modeling, selling these models is phenomenal, right? I don't really do it. I've never had to do it because I don't.
Never tried.
Yeah. Like, but Marco loves it.
Yeah.
All of his selling is done with an iPad, mapping stuff out. Like, I really see the value in doing it. I'm just a bit old school and I just talk people into doing stuff.
Yeah, it's
now,
funny.
I think if you're good at it, tremendous asset. I think if you do it poorly and it looks like it was done with a 4-year-old with a crayon, like one of our old clients said it's their pitch deck and it was like, who the made this?
Yeah.
Because this looks like
It's like
a 4-year-old
you
did
made
it
on
with
make on
Microsoft
PowerPoint.
Paint.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like, it needs to be good. Although, like, I think a really good one is really powerful. I think a really bad one is reverse.
Now, just for clarity, like Vanessa, in that, does she do that as a part of the entire sales process, or does she pull out certain parts and go, now I'm going to share screen and we're going to do this part together?
Yeah, I think she does it that way. I've never been sold by her, though.
So I've seen, like, we've had clients that
She does
to
the
us.
classy clothes. That's
Yeah.
her thing.
And that whole process
Shout out to
is-
Vanessa. I haven't spoken to her for a while. She'd be very cool.
Like, I've had clients that come to us, they didn't end up being clients, because their entire thing is like slide deck. So they're pitching the whole time from a PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I was speaking to a guy that, wanted to work with us last week, and he's like, oh, we close over, like we do our sales call over a presentation. I was like, why? He goes, oh, it works really well. I'm like, okay, let's get into some of the numbers. Turns out they converted like 10%. I'm like, oh, interesting. So it works really well. You're not open to changing that, but you're closing at 10%. He's like, okay, you see what I'm sort of coming up against here? Like I wouldn't really classify 10% as
What do they sell?
working really well. Some sort of coaching package, right?
Yeah, if it's a coaching package, 10% is garbaggio.
Terrible. And
If
I
it's,
was like,
if it's like a BizOp, 10% is like not horrible, but it's
Depending,
for sure not good. Like,
yeah,
For our Amazon offer, we're closing over 30%.
we don't use it. We don't need to. But I was just like, okay, so like you see how that's a bit of a problem right now.
It's very monotonous. So like I think one thing that I've like in the Army, right? Like they have 40-minute sessions.
Yeah.
Because the Army has done extensive research on how to teach people.
Yeah.
Right? Because they teach fucking morons.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like some of the IQ levels that you get.
They're not.
It's not called an IQ level. It's good. There's a certain score that you have to do when you do like an aptitude test. And like different jobs require different aptitudes, right? And some of the lower ones, like one of the lowest one is like truck driving, right? Super low
Yeah.
aptitude required. Doesn't mean truck drivers are dumb. It just means for the Army, they've dictated that is a low aptitude.
You just
requirement.
don't need to be smart to do
Exactly,
the job.
right?
Yeah.
Same as artillery. Artillery like has the lowest,
Point shit. Yeah.
right? Which is terrifying. But anyway, yes. And so like they have learned how to teach people very well, which is one of the reasons why I think I'm a good teacher, is because I do a style that is very like breakdown, like this, do that. That's what it's called. And so 40 minutes was the limit that the Australian military dictated anyone could pay attention for, right? And there's like limits to how much of that can be PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Specifically limits. And it's like, I don't remember what it was, but I think it was like 7 or 12 minutes at a
late
time.
to our next meeting, so I'm letting them know.
Yeah, it's like 7 or 12 minutes at a time. Like you couldn't have more than a certain amount of slides per presentation. So you couldn't do what we call death by light pro, right? And the reason for that is because people just tune out. So I think if you're just like, it's very difficult because there's like a certain monotony to like changing slides, you know?
Yeah.
And then like if all you're doing is like just showing people slides, like it's very difficult for you to create any meaningful connection with that person.
Yeah, totally.
But I think there is real validity in having a really good presentation. If you have a really good one, which is like short, sharp, and to the point, like I think it can make a shitty salesperson pretty successful.
Yeah. Anyway, the guy was like, I'm like, well, so like, if we could close at a higher rate than that and not use those slides, is that something you'd be open to? He's like, oh no, this is like the way that we do it. I'm like, okay, well then, I don't think we can work together.
Good day, sir.
Yeah, good day, because like, when you're forced to use that presentation, you're forced to go through each of those slides, and you may not agree with the way that they're presented as the salesperson. That may interrupt your flow. It may have so many negative connotations, and you end up just skipping stuff. Then all of a sudden, the prospect's like, oh, why are we skipping that slide? Oh, it's not important. Why is the is it there? You know what I mean? And then there's instant sales resistance. Like, these guys can't even put together a proper slide deck. How are they going to put together a service?
Yeah. So I think like when it's done well, it's good. I think when it's done bad,
I think when
it's
it's done well, it's
I think at 10%, if you're selling a coaching offer, you really need to have a look at your slide deck. So if those guys listen, yeah, it's probably
get
not
them
very good.
professionally made.
Yeah, get a graphic designer to go through it.
And just like read every deck and say, the same way that like we teach to evaluate your script, like ask every question that you ask, evaluate what is the purpose of this question and does it lead closer towards my goal?
Yeah.
You need to go through that process and look at every single slide. Does this flow from the last one to the next one? Is there a point? Am I getting what I want from this slide? Is it eliciting something?
Yeah.
If the answer is no, then cut those slides out. They're useless.
I think, presentative selling it's pretty garbage.
Yeah.
I don't think you have the ability to build any consequence in it. And I believe that really what makes people buy is a consequence.
Because conversations flow, right? You can't flow in a presentation.
Yeah.
You know, like a direct presentation.
You call me the flow master, I get it.
Yeah, okay. Well, anyway, like, it's pretty straightforward, like B2B to B2C. Is there anything else that you want to talk about regarding that?
Not really. Like, I think, like, as a salesperson career progresses, like, I think one thing that I've really been focusing from a sales management, even like a recruitment standpoint from when we do some recruitment, is
better guys want bigger deals.
Exactly.
Deals are
It's
B2B.
like, you can't pigeonhole a salesperson in a position because they're good at sales, right? Like one of the worst decisions that I could make is take someone like Marco, who we've recently pretty much taken off sales calls. He's doing some B2B stuff, but like he's really more strategic managing. He's still doing sales, but it's like if I was just to pigeonhole him, I could just put him in Jeremy's account. I could honestly just fill him up
with calls all day, every
50
day.
calls a week. He would close 45 of them. We take very large commissions on that. We would make a load of money.
But he'd hate it and quit eventually.
Yeah, he would get bored of it. There'd be a lack of fulfillment there. And so like when I'm placing salespeople or into a business, or when I'm, doing sales for people, like when we have our own salespeople, I need to understand the career path of that salesperson, because like that salesperson's career is more important in the long term. If you want to keep that person, we want to be able to make them happy and fulfill them. So like I need to make sure that like I'm managing that process. And B2B is a good next step for people towards management because it's a more complicated sales environment. There's more things to think about. It's more interesting. The deals are bigger. The commissions are bigger. The sales cycle is slower. But yeah, so I think it's a good transition phase for someone to go through if they're looking to sort of like stay in the realm of sales, but potentially not be directly selling all the time.
And because you don't really, all you take is like B2B calls. Like,
Mm.
what do you enjoy about that as opposed to like straight B2C?
It's a good question.
I prefer it. I feel like I have a more intelligent, higher level people. that I'm
Yeah,
having
I think your
conversations with.
average prospect is
Yeah.
probably of a higher quality.
Yeah, yeah.
I think finances are not as much the
Nope.
issue and more about like, can we solve the problem? And I feel like you can still drop hammers on people, which is good. Not like you can in B2C. B2C is fun because you can really drop some hammers on people.
Smash.
But yeah, I think it's a more, I just like more complicated puzzles.
Yeah, yeah.
Like-
You've learned how to solve the B2C puzzle.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, how do I get a harder puzzle?
And for me, when we're selling our stuff, I sell with pure authority. Like I do
Yeah.
whatever I tell everyone not to do, but it's because I am the guy on the camera. So
It's-
I can really
exactly.
sell people on like hardcore authority frames, which again is not replicatable.
No.
Although it's getting to the stage where Marco can replicate it
Mm.
because he has the authority as well, and same as you. But yeah, like it's interesting. Like if I'm selling for Serhnant, like we definitely haven't figured that out yet. Like we're figuring it out, but like every offer, they're harder to figure out. I think B2B deals. It gets hard, but I think once you figure it out, it's really easy.
Yeah.
It's like just take them through the process. And Jeremy's been really instrumental in sort of helping to figure out how to do stuff. And we've figured out some things that we're not doing.
Mm.
Like you can't shoot from the hip in B2B. You can't just go in there and wing it. Whereas with B2C, like I
It's
can
gotta
just
be
go in
planned.
there, you give me any offer, I'll just make it work. With B2B, like there has to be very specific problems they have to have.
Yeah.
And we have to have very specific solutions because the $250,000 3-month consulting deal has to solve a very serious problem.
Yes, and you have to understand that problem well enough
Yeah.
to be able to explain it and answer
And it's the
questions.
only thing where if you're not expensive enough, they'll just say no because they'll think you're shit.
Exactly, yeah.
If
Which
you go
is
in there and you want
Not
to
a
fix
problem in
$1
B2C.
million problem and you want to fix it for 20 grand, they're going to be like, what the f-? Somebody else will pitch something worse for 300 and they'll pay the 300
Yeah.
because there's a higher perceived value.
Exactly.
So yeah, man, it's
Money
interesting.
pays, right?
Yeah. So
All right. I don't think we have much more to cover.
No, that's it for
a short
today.
one. Yeah.
I think if you guys like it, make sure if you're watching this on YouTube, you like, subscribe with the notification bell. If you guys are watching this anywhere else, make sure you're listening, make sure you subscribe, shoot us any comments. We have a couple cool things right now. We have the Closing Code Facebook group. We also have like a wallet card for your Apple Wallet or your Google Wallet that gives you access to exclusive content. So we'll link that in the descriptions. Make sure that you
can show it
go
maybe.
there and download that. But yeah, we appreciate you guys listening to us, and we will see you later.
See you guys. Have a good one.
Put that coffee down. Coffee's for closers only.